5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8, 7, 6. I grew up in a family in which we were interested in organic food and the mind-body connection, actually. My father was a dentist and holistically oriented, and he would say that you can tell the state of somebody's health by looking in their mouth, and that also the mouth is the center of the personality, and that's why no one likes you mucking around in there, and why dentists have the second highest suicide rate, second to psychiatrists, in that the mouth is perhaps less demoralizing than looking into their mind. So I grew up with a different take. My aunt and uncle were both medical doctors, straight medical doctors, and they made fun of my father's ideas, but he was always happier. And our family did not believe too much in conventional medicine, so my earliest memories are of having my brother, Billy, being signed out of the hospital against medical advice. He wouldn't eat. And a nurse came up to my mother and said, "Get him out of here. The doctors don't know what's going on. He'll die if he stays here." And I'd had a sister who'd died in a hospital early on, and she didn't eat either, and we never knew what was wrong with her. So imagine you're a kid, I'm 8 at this time, and my little brother is home, and he has a tube down his throat, and my parents are feeding him by tube every hour on the hour. And he's throwing it back up. And at the age of a year, he was alive. At the age of a year, he weighed 10 pounds. And my parents tried to find a doctor who knew what was going on. And they finally found a woman doctor, Dr. Crump, at Women's Medical Center in Philadelphia, who did pediatric endoscopy, put a tube down and said his esophagus is so eroded from this tube that if you continue to tube feed him that way, his esophagus will erode through, there'll be a big hole in it, and he will die. Let's take out the tube and see what happens. And so she had enough faith in the healing power of the human body that she took out the tube, and they gave him liquids through what was called clysis, where you put a big bolus of fluid with a big needle into the thigh. And after a couple days, he started to eat. And we still don't know why. And I remember going to the airport, and my mother was holding him on her lap, and he was eating a roll that the stewardess had given him, and we all started to cry. And when I went to medical school, which I wasn't going to do, I never wanted to be a doctor. I thought my aunt and uncle's life looked not fun. They had to leave every Thanksgiving and every Christmas. But I remember thinking, when I go to medical school, I want to find out why doctors don't talk to patients. I want to find out why the fullness of the mystery is not addressed. And I never intended to practice medicine. But I always believed from my childhood experiences that there was more going on than what we were taught. And like most medical students, I became puffed up. I became very proud of what we could do with drugs and surgery. But when I saw the first time I saw a baby born, I started to cry. I just wept with a combination, really, of joy and also sorrow. And the nurse was yelling at the medical student, and she, because he had let go of the cord, and they're like a mini fire hose, and it was going all over the wall. And I'm thinking, this is holy. This is a holy place. This is not a place where you yell at anybody. And it occurred to me, nobody should be in that room during a birth who didn't know this was holy. And it was that experience that caused me to become an obstetrician gynecologist, and being around women giving birth was like being like breathing. It was that easy. But I also saw that fear and anger and all of this completely messed up the process of birth. But I didn't know how to get those ideas across to the patient, especially if her mother had already told her, "Now you'll see how I suffered with you." And I did all kinds of work trying to prove to myself that the mind-body connection was real, and how did we get into the mind so that the body would change. I myself had terrible migraine headaches from the age of 12 to the age of 21, once a month, twice a month, whatever. I'd been worked up in a Boston hospital, a week there with all kinds of testing. They never knew what it was. At the age of 19, I had to do this English paper, a critique of the poem Ode on a Grecian Urn, or Ode to a Grecian Urn by Keats, and I didn't know what the professor wanted. And like most migrainous personalities, I needed to know what it was they wanted of me, and I couldn't figure it out. And it was in Cleveland, Ohio, and it was in November. And when I came out of the library, not knowing how to get an A in the course, I temporarily thought, maybe I should just throw myself in front of a car. It would be easier than this. And then I thought, no, you'll break your leg. And then you're going to have to do the poem. And then you're going to have to lug around a cast at the same time. The idea that I had a choice never occurred to me because I was operating on a belief system that was obsolete. I go back to my dorm, I call my parents, and I say, I hate it here. This isn't working for me. And my father says, quit. So quit. You can come home. And I changed my mind. And in that moment, I changed the migraine headaches. I maybe had 3 or 4 the rest of my whole life because I changed this pattern, this 6th emotional center, perception, thought, morality, which is what headaches are. And my perception was, you must do this, and I've really been driven my whole life to get it right. And get it right, though, in the way that the culture, and in my case, the practice of medicine says is right. But here's the problem. Most of what I was taught in medicine about what causes disease is not the truth. I cured my migraine headaches, not with Imitrex, not with Advil. I cured them with a change of perception, you see. And the only time that I got them from then on is when I was doing something migrainous, like trying to clean up my entire house in half of a day, because I had the time. Now, if I could just organize the clutter from 25 years, and I can get in this state of being driven, where I'm completely disconnected from my mind and my body, and I'm just going for it. It's a beautiful way to get through a surgical subspecialty. Keep your head down, keep your nose to the grindstone. But you know what happens when you do that? You get cortisol levels that are too high, adrenaline levels that are too high. These are the stress hormones. They constrict blood vessels in every place in the body. And headaches are just the beginning. So the belief system behind the migraines, which I had for as long as I could remember, was you must get straight A's in school. It was this internal pressure. You must perform to a certain level. And I was the valedictorian. And in my class of Ellicottville Central High, everyone who'd ever gone to college that I knew about had gotten pregnant and dropped out. So I had this idea that when I went to college, I was going to be washed out quickly. So I studied this was in the 60s and 70s. This was, everybody's on birth control, having sex with everything not nailed down, and they're all smoking dope. And I am here to study what is wrong with the rest of you people. I didn't understand what the Kent State thing was all about. What are you doing? Okay, it's spring in Cleveland. You're throwing rocks at the horses on Euclid Avenue of the policemen. But I have a biology exam here. So there was this tremendous drive to achieve in a certain way, which was academically in a certain way. When I temporarily decided it would be easier to throw myself in front of a car, and then quickly realized, it's like mental health came on board quickly, because I grew up as a pretty optimistic person. When my father said, so quit, it was that I had the patriarchal authority figure in my family saying, you have another choice. You can quit. Come home. Live here. And in that moment, I could stay. Because I knew I could leave. Because I instantly, in that moment, thought, okay, what would I do in my hometown? What, would I marry my high school boyfriend? I mean, what would I do? Probably it would be better if I stayed here and finished this degree. But maybe I could finish it in a way that was a little lighter and more free. And what is the worst thing that could happen? You might get a B instead of an A. And what is the worst thing that could happen there? Probably nothing. And so I actually began to enjoy aspects of my life and live more in the moment. And then had the experience, actually, of getting a C in organic chemistry and being thrilled to pass. I had a big fibroid tumor in my late 40s, and I was diagnosed on pelvic exam right after I finished my first book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. So the first place I went in my head was, oh, I caught one. I've been around fibroids so long that I caught one. You know, when you're under stress, you go right back to your original programming, which is the germ theory of disease, right? So I must have caught one, like these things are contagious. And, but you know, the law of attraction is contagious. And I thought it was something about the book, because I knew fibroids were creativity that hasn't been birthed yet. And then it got bigger, and it got bigger, and it got bigger, until finally one Thanksgiving I had that experience of, and I tried, you know, acupuncture twice a week. I was macrobiotic. I did everything known to humanity, and my patients had often been able to dematerialize fibroids, and I always knew it was possible. I couldn't. And I finally, one Thanksgiving, said, I'm so sick of dressing around this thing. I look pregnant. I'm just getting it out of here. I mean, that's what surgery's for. Let's go do it. And I knew enough when I went under anesthesia to have the anesthesiologist repeat some statements so that I would reprogram and go into sort of deep hypnosis. And the one statement was, and when you awaken, the pattern that created this will have left your life. And I was a single woman 2 years later. Fibroids are creativity that hasn't been birthed yet, and they are also caused by shoving your creative energy, your second chakra, sex, power, money, drive into some kind of avenue. Because, you know, ovaries are female balls, and we have drives toward what we want. In my case, I wanted partnership in my relationship. And my relationship was not where I was going to find partnership. But what happens if you don't know better and you don't have the insight, if it's not working, you do it harder. And so I kept trying everything I knew to do to fix the marriage, which is completely dumb. I mean, you have to work on fixing you or transforming you. But the fibroid had gotten to this certain point, and then I had the surgery, and as I did my recovery, I said, when I do this recovery, I want this to be the postpartum rest that I have never given myself. And I rested for a whole month. And I said, you know, the next thing that comes out of my womb, I am going to have a postpartum rest. And so I began to change patterns in my relationship because I started to take care of my deepest self, starting right with my womb, the center, really, of a woman's body. And that began to change the dynamic of the relationship, and it really had nowhere to go. Though you don't know that until retrospectively. I mean, it's like I really, even in the divorce proceedings, was certain that I could do something to make it work. So we have these mental patterns, and my pattern certainly is like, show up and get her done. Okay, and it works good, you know, but it doesn't work in a relationship or in some place where you have to let the universe bring in what's missing. That's more yin. I was very good at yang. I'm a really good surgical type brain, but this was to balance and allow something to come to you. People do affirmations, and they do their journals and they wear purple and all that. But boy, when it comes to the vagina, the vulva, the breasts, the uterus, that all goes out the window. Because these organs, we're taught these are lemons. These organs were created because Eve ate the apple and screwed up. And these are going to get you. And so the whole conversation around women's health is, what can go wrong? Let's screen for what can go wrong. And if we don't find it this year, come back next year. We will. And so in my own body, in my own life, in my own profession, it's been how do we turn the conversation around, and it begins with changing the way you think about this female body. The biggest miracle of my life over the past 7 years is that I have discovered that it is possible after menopause to be sexy, to be attractive, to be a woman, to realize the game isn't over. In fact, the game is just beginning. What a miracle. It's been my experience that men are desperate to support and appreciate women. And they can't do it until a woman knows how to support and appreciate herself. And then she can teach a man how to support her. We have right now in history this very strange situation in which when a woman doesn't know how to support herself, when she doesn't even know what turns her on, she turns to the man and says, do it for me. And if he can't figure out what to give her for Valentine's Day or her birthday or their anniversary, if she doesn't give him any clues, he's a loser. He loses. And if I were a guy, I would be terrified to be in relationship with a woman who doesn't know what she desires or what turns her on, because you're left with a load that is too heavy. So the first thing I would say for a guy is, don't get in a relationship with that kind of woman, okay? But in labor, it's fabulously obvious. Your job is to love your woman. That's all. Your job is to love her. And remember, the energy that gets the baby in is the energy that gets the baby out. And that's Ina May Gaskin, who wrote Spiritual Midwifery. And so encourage the women in your life to care for themselves at the deepest level. And if they turn on you premenstrually because they're in what Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body, you know, we all have to do our part to clean up our part of the pain body, and the pain body of all women comes up premenstrually. What you say is, honey, take a bath, do whatever you need. I'll see you later. What I want all women to know is that within their biology, they have the code for enhancing all of life. The egg can take a sperm and heal the genetics of a defective sperm. The egg contains the nourishment that the new fetus needs to get to the stage before it gets to the placenta and implants. Every time a woman is in her power, she upgrades everyone and everything around her. This is not a zero-sum model. When a woman is doing better and she's healthier and happier, she raises me up. Whenever a woman gets healthy and happier, she heals the earth. The woman's body is a reflection of the earth. And everything we do to take care of ourselves, to feel pleasure, to be orgasmically joyous, heals the entire planet. Everyone in South Boston would call in the middle of the night for sex advice because, you know, this was St. Margaret's Hospital, Catholic, and, you know, they didn't know anything. And so this woman calls in the middle of the night once. She says to the nurse, "Is it true when you use that foam it burns your husband's penis?" It's 3 in the morning. The nurse goes, "I hope so." there's this interesting thing that happens when somebody gets it, really downloads a more positive way of thinking. They get hormonal balancing, for one thing. We know that when somebody is thinking with their heart, like they see a puppy or a sleeping baby, and they go, oh, your DHEA levels rise, which begins to balance your hormones, but something else really more important happens, and that is the beat-to-beat variability of the heart normalizes. And you get into this wave pattern that you can see on a heart rate monitor that actually begins to balance the entire body, given that the heart is a huge electromagnet that in fact trains the rest of the body. So this thought or this state of deep relaxation or whatever it is that enlightens you actually results in a decrease in stress hormones, a normalization of blood sugar, decreasing of blood pressure, and a relaxation of all smooth muscles. It is, in fact, a balance of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic is the brake, and sympathetic is the gas. And most people in this culture have the gas on all the time with an occasional brake. So you're going around like this. You need to have, when both are in balance, which happens when you breathe through your nose while exercising, you actually, it's like banking your wood stove with just the right amount of wood and air. You can work so much more efficiently and so much longer because you've got this beautiful yin-yang balance of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So any thought of, oh, man, I got to get straight A's here, or something's going to happen, I don't know what. I mean, in my own case, I don't know what's going to happen. You will fail. This will be terrible. But then when you go, so I could quit. I remember my sister at the time went to 4 different colleges. I remember thinking, what is wrong with you? I mean, this will be on your record. And now I realize years later, no one has looked at my record for years. Nobody cares. Nobody knows. And those are the thoughts that just balance it all out. When you get it, that you have so much more control over your life than you thought you did, or control over your experience of your life, if not the events of your life, there is this sense that is so playful and so joyous, and you can just start to giggle when you realize you've made it all up, you're creating it all, and there's a sense of joyous relief. You feel like a kid, but you've got all the ego strength of an adult. And it's but just before you get there, there's usually this time of pain-filled joy or joy-filled pain, where you might have to break down with some deep sobs. I had that happen in a workshop with Ann Wilson Schaaf, and we were doing an intervention on one of my partners who we suspected was an alcoholic. And we all went to get over, to cure our codependence. We knew it was killing us. We started a women's clinic, right? We were blaming the guys. They weren't doing it right. We're going to do it right. Run by women, for women. Here we are 2 years out. We're more exhausted than we ever were when the guys were running it, and we weren't making any money. So we thought, okay, we're all codependent, so we better get ourselves to treatment. So we go away to a 10-day treatment, and by then we suspect someone's been drinking too much. And I'm wanting to do the intervention. Come on, let's get to the intervention phase. And it's day 8 of this workshop, and people are down on the mats, and they're crying, and they're weeping, and I'm thinking, you poor slobs, you've got so much pain. The rest of us have it together. You don't, of course. And it was like being in labor and delivery. Then the time comes for the intervention, and Ann Schaaf, and I start to, the intervention, you tell the person how much you love them. I start to tell my colleague how much it meant to me when she parked my car when I was in labor with my second daughter. To have a doctor support you was like almost too much, and I started to cry. And Ann said, why don't you lie down and see what comes up? I lie down to see what comes up. And I quickly push it down, push it down, push it down, push it down, which I was really good at. And I sat up and I said, no, I'm okay. I can handle it. And she says to me, you're so tired. And the dam burst. And I lay down and I sobbed for hours And in that moment, I went through not only my own tears, but I went deep into a place called the pain of all women. All the women who never had anyone with them in labor, all the babies that died, all of the pain of women. And I knew where my work came from. And I knew what I came here to do, which was to transform that pain into joy.